From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, I'm Rob Cairns. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief creator of Amazing Ideas at Stunning Digital Marketing. In today's podcast, I sit down with founder and CEO Mattias Nielsen as we talk about his product, Oliver POS, and how it works with WooCommerce. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast. Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. I'm here with CEO Mattias Nielsen today. How are you today?
Good, and you?
I'm doing well. So let's jump right in. And I know you've done some POS development in past and currently. Jump in and tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into this space.
Yeah, sure. So I've been working in tech as long as I can remember. Ever since I was 13, 14, I've been very interested in developing and building stuff myself. And then when I started a tech startup in China a decade ago by now, I guess, that I sold and didn't really know what to do. So when I moved to Canada with my wife, we started a little development agency called Creative Maple, where we helped small merchants and startups build some cool websites and web shops. And yeah, I've been doing that for a few years, and we kind of noticed a little bit of a gap, and that's how we got into the POS part of things.
That's really interesting. And we were talking in the pre-show a little bit. You're originally from Denmark, and that's an interesting story. How did you end up in Newfoundland from Denmark?
Yeah, so I've been living all over the world. Grew up in Greenland, originally from Denmark, but when my wife was pregnant in China, we kind of knew, okay, now's the time to move on and find a place where we want to settle down. And then I was like, okay, Greenland might be a little bit too small for me to start a startup, but I love nature and I want to have a place where I can go out and explore that. And for me, Newfoundland seemed like the right place. My parents have been in and out of the province for the last 20 years or so. So it's like, yeah, Newfoundland it is. And then we moved out without ever having lived here and yeah, settled down and started a little company.
That's a bit of a risk. Besides POS systems, point of sale systems, does your agency or your company do any more than that? Or are you doing just standard websites or
So
e-commerce or Woo or
yeah, so it all started with Creative Maple, really. That was an agency that built 3 to 5 websites a week. So we grew it pretty big.
okay.
Websites like WordPress websites or WooCommerce web shops and whatnot. Um, and we grew that, and then out of that we kind of noticed this gap in the market of we built really advanced web shops and we couldn't find anything that was as adaptable on the POS side of things to
Hmm.
work with these advanced web shops. So really that's where the idea of Oliver POS came from, and now today the agency is not really running. We have a couple of clients left and whatnot, but we're not really doing much with it. We have just gone full in on building the most adaptable POS solution. And yeah, that's what I use my life on right now.
Yeah, when I think about clients that I've had in POS as they use, they very often do a WordPress website now, and then they use something like QuickBooks, and it becomes a bit of a mishmash for a lot of small businesses. What is the typical POS system run for a small business? And like, how far do you take it? Do you take it from sale right to payment processing to accounting or and so on?
Sure. So for us, it was really trying to look at most solutions. There's kind of like two two POS solutions for WooCommerce, and then maybe Oliver POS in between those. There's the one that builds on top of WooCommerce,
Yep.
like a plugin, and then you run them there.
Hmm.
And they are often not really tied well into to proper payment processors and hardware and whatnot. Then there is the more traditional POS that are totally separate from WooCommerce, but then tries and sync in after the fact and try and keep stuff in sync, but are doing things in a very different way. They often work very well with processors and hardware and whatnot, but are having a little bit of complications with the syncing part of WooCommerce being extremely advanced in what you can do with product types and whatnot. So for us, we wanted to take the best of both worlds, where you install a little bridge into WooCommerce, or into WordPress, I should say, and that bridge sits and tells Oliver what's going on in WooCommerce, what are your tax settings, your currency settings, your payment processing, your orders, customers, products, whatever. We then run whatever that is expected out of the POS. So think hardware, hardware terminal like credit card terminals, receipt printing, cash management,
Yeah.
such as cash drawers, whatever. So anything that are at the point of sale, the physical sale, we take, and then we look at WooCommerce as I normally say the single source of truth.
Yep.
So whenever you're doing a sale in Oliver, you're really doing it in WooCommerce without knowing, right? So it's instantly available in WooCommerce once you have done the sale. Your inventory and whatnot is fully up to date, and yeah, all of those good benefits, right?
Which payment processors does your system usually interact with?
Yeah, so we've started working with quite a lot. We have a few Canadian here. So the Moneris and Sonas. We have Chase, WePay, Card Connect, Stripe now authorized.net. List goes on quite a lot. We can process payments. I think it's in 52 countries now.
Okay.
And yeah, it's kind of one of the things of the boxes we want to help the merchant tick is how do we take the physical credit card that your merchants are used or your customers in the stores are used to paying with, and get that properly into WooCommerce and then out to your accounting solution and whatnot, right?
Yeah. I hate to say it. I know in my business, the one payment processor we all get stuck using on some websites that I despise is PayPal. You
Oh
couldn't get
yeah, we
me
do
to
that
use
too. Yeah.
PayPal. I know in the Woo space they're very heavily. I know my good friend Bob Dunn, Bob WP, who runs the WooCommerce Do the Woo podcast. He they're a sponsor, but they're just not my thing. I've had my issues with the PayPals of the world, and I try to avoid them like the plague, to be honest with you. So
Yeah, so we have a similar like I totally get where you're coming from. They're decent if you wanna input a card and whatnot, but if you are selling in person, it becomes rather expensive. If it's a lot better to go with a more professional physical payment processor, right? Like where
yep,
you get the old school terminal, you get so much better rates and whatnot. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. There's no question, but for small business, the reality is some of those terminals aren't cheap to run. So if you're running a low level transaction, you're better off with the Stripes or the Squares of the world instead of paying, because especially in the days of COVID, I was talking to a good friend of mine who runs a jewelry store the other day, and he went to a cellular payment processing terminal, and that increased like $40 a month to his bill. So unless you're doing the volume, it's not worth it, right? So
Yeah, so we do a lot of advising on those kind of things, and I totally agree. There's kind of a cutoff line depending on where on how much you process.
yep,
It might be better off with PayPal or Stripe or whatever, but when you get to a certain level of volume, like you gotta get $8,000 of revenue every month, then most of the traditional processors will start to be more affordable. But it also depends on what hardware you choose and whatnot. So
yep. Yeah.
This is kind of a
Um,
mix.
and the other thing that's changed too is in the old days, a lot of the terminals were dial. You needed a separate phone line because they dialed out. And now most of these terminals, even for small businesses, now are connected by an internet connection. So it's like liquidity split and you're done, which
Yeah,
is one of the biggest
absolutely.
changes. Up until about 3 or 4 years ago, we only saw that in like the Walmarts and the Staples and the big box stores of the world. Now we're seeing them everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. The technology are helping forge a new way there for
Yeah,
sure.
no question. Does your POS system ever interface into an accounting system as well, either directly or using something like Zapier to push connection, push transactions there?
Yeah, so for us, we've taken a very different approach, and it's been at our core from the beginning. So we kind of believe if we do it, if we sync with WooCommerce really, really well,
Yeah.
we don't need to worry about accounting, and it turns out to be true for us. But all of the good quality accounting plugins for WooCommerce turns out to work with Oliver out of the box most of the time.
Oh,
And
good.
if not, it's a minor tweak, right? So we wanted to kind of make sure that the plugins that work in WooCommerce to do all kind of cool things that they also are able to run in Oliver, right?
Yeah. Has the move in the WordPress community to Gutenberg impacted the Oliver plugin or the coding behind that at all? Or?
Not really, because we do take it out of that environment into a controlled environment in
Yeah.
a React JS and React Native environment that we obviously control. When we do that to guarantee the speed of the in-person sales, right?
Yeah.
So
And in terms of your client base, is it kind of in North America, in Europe? Is it all over the world? What do
yeah,
you?
so it is definitely all over the world. I think we've crossed 100 countries by now.
That's amazing.
But yeah, so it's been pretty exciting in that way. But North America and Europe are definitely our strongholds. So I would say Canada and US is absolutely the biggest piece of it, like 58 to 60% or something.
Have you had any big issues with things like GDPR rules or Canadian privacy rules, or in the US, as we know, privacy is determined on a state by state basis? Has any of that come into play for you?
Not really, and we're really following WooCommerce when it comes to that, right? So it all depends on your WooCommerce setup in that regard, where we store it and whatnot. We follow their way.
Yeah.
So that way we've kind of taken the best of the WooCommerce world, I think.
Yeah, you're getting Woo to do your heavy lifting, so to
that
speak, which
was that
is
was kind of why we started in the first place. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And Woo's a pretty stable platform. I know there's a new version in release candidate right now. I would almost suspect there'll be a new Woo release sometime next week or a patch. And my gut on that is the point one release of WordPress is due out on the 8th.
Yeah.
So you can almost guarantee Woo's going to come pretty close behind it, I would think, right? That's pretty normal.
Yeah, they've improved a lot lately. I find that, and they kind of needed to as well. But I think they've gotten better and in their reporting and in their initial customer
Yeah.
setup and stuff lately. A lot of good things have happened there.
Yeah. I've built a couple e-commerce stores, big ones, and I find that Woo is way better than it was 2 years ago. The only drawback, and I've talked about it here and with other people in the community, is there's not really a big competitor in the WordPress space for e-commerce than Woo anymore. There's a couple small players, but there's nobody out there. It's such a hard landscape to navigate.
It really is. For us, it's okay, of course, and I might be biased, but I think it's important for WordPress to have a giant to fight the other Shopify's and
Hmm.
Squares that are sitting with all of your data and whatnot, right? So
Yeah.
um so for that I'm okay with the WooCommerce giant.
It's funny how you mentioned Square because Square's gone to an e-commerce system now where you can spin up a page with 3 or 4 products with nothing. And I'll be honest, I think if you got 3 or 4 products, that's probably a better way to go than dabbling in the words of woo in a POS system. It's probably not
Oh,
worth your time.
absolutely, absolutely. Like we're very particular in our mindset of if you're a Square customer, you're probably not the right one for us. We wouldn't recommend ourselves as well. Like for me, Square is all day long. If you're at a marketplace and you only need to sell once in a while, and you're like you're making
Yeah.
soap in your basement or whatever it is, and you have 4 or 5 different soap bars, perfect. Don't do more. It won't be worth it, right?
Yeah.
So it all depends. Yeah.
I like the way you think because there's so many people who get caught and say, "Oh, my website's a WordPress website. I got to build everything in WordPress." And I always say to people, "But is it worth it? Is it worth your development time? Is it worth your costs? Maybe it's not if you got 1 or 2 items. I mean, then
Yeah,
that's the
Wix or
whole new
Square,
ballgame."
whatever, that does the job for you. Especially if you're not technical as well, right? Like WordPress have its advantages for sure, no doubt about it.
Yep.
And I'm a massive fan of WordPress and WooCommerce. Obviously, we both are, but it's not for everyone, and it doesn't need to be. So
No, and I agree. And I think truly what I think makes you different, Matthias, than a lot of people is a lot of people in the WordPress space will push a WordPress solution, even though it's not the best solution for a client. And I don't think that's always the right approach personally. So,
no, I don't think so either. Yeah, it really depends. Then there's the other way when you need a really complicated sale or booking solution or yeah, advanced product type or whatever. Well, then WooCommerce is the really strong, right? And the
yeah.
customizability. But at that point, it's also worth putting in the development hours or design hours or whatever is
Mhm.
required to do so.
Yeah, you're going to put those. What most people don't realize is when you get to that level, and I think the biggest Woo shop I've built without a POS had 3,000 items in it, which is just a few.
Yeah.
And I've got a client right now who's doing a Woo shop. He's all online, so he's not doing POS, and he's running about 250 items. Well, people don't realize if you go to Spotify, not Spotify, Shopify,
Shopify.
sorry. Yeah, you
Oh,
go Shopify, you got to put time in anyway. And people need to realize you're going to have to put the time in one way or the other. It's just which poison do you want to play with, so to speak.
oh, absolutely. And at that point, I know what poison I would take. Like then I'm a massive believer in WooCommerce and the open source and free
Hmm.
free playground. You don't have to pay. Like they don't. You're free to choose the processor you want and whatnot too, right?
Yeah,
So the long term growth makes sense there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Cost wise, if somebody wanted to go to a POS system like yours, what are they looking at for a small business for cost? For not we're not talking the server side, we'll get to that after, but in terms of the development to implement it, the licensing fees, that kind of things.
Like in terms of Oliver POS, you mean?
Hmm.
Yeah, so we have kind of made an odd decision, but we have gone freemium, but with a really good free plan. So if you're a small store, we're here to help merchants. I've
Okay.
been a merchant store owner myself and know how hard it is. So we've done a really good free plan, and I embrace everyone that want to just be free
Yeah.
to take that. It doesn't need to cost money. You can develop apps and everything or plugins within Oliver to do all of the things you want. And then we have a paid plan if you're bigger store with more registers or locations or you need some extra advanced features and stuff, then they start at $25 to $49 and upwards, right?
Okay.
But the free plan is we have many users on it and it's absolutely a solid one to get started on.
Is the free plan available on WordPress.org if somebody's looking
Yeah,
for it?
yeah. So you just go into where you would install plugins in WordPress, type
Hmm.
Oliver POS, click install, and then you're off to the races. And
Great.
we host it for free so we can guarantee your speed. We give the same support to everyone,
Yep.
no matter if you're paid or not. You have a real human to chat with.
So
So
the Oliver POS side is always hosted on your server, not on the client server, correct?
yeah, we do that. It's still always paired from your WooCommerce site.
Hmm.
So everything is running back and forth. But we found that we started off with just living in WordPress, but
Yep.
we can't guarantee the payment security, the hardware compatibility for the native apps well enough, and the speed. I often was finding that sometimes clients don't really pay for the biggest servers in WordPress and whatnot. And then they would be frustrated that now I'm standing in my store and somebody it's slow at checking out, right? And we didn't want that to happen. So we've kind of built the best of both worlds.
Yeah, what most people get hung up on WordPress, and you kind of beat me to the server question, is they go out and they start on a $3.50 plan a month, and then they try and build a WooCommerce store. And then they
Yeah,
come back and they wonder why their customers are leaving because their user experience is bad. And then they're not doing anything and they're not leaving stuff in checkout and they're not processing. And then they say, what's wrong? And the reality is, when you pay for $3.50 a month hosting, you get exactly what you pay for.
yeah. And and the unfortunate thing is they probably don't realize. But what happened with Oliver POS when we were only hosted on that $3 site,
Yeah.
the front end experience for the cashiers in the store would be slow too.
Yeah.
And we got so many complaints about this is so slow, and we could like then we can say, well, it's all your fault, but that doesn't really work, right? So what we did was we built this bridge into our own servers that are loading up with a platform that can run full speed. So you're never going to be slowed down, even if you're on a cheap server.
Yeah. On your servers, or on your back end, are you running redundant servers? So if one goes down,
Yeah,
it continues
yeah.
on.
So full redundancy environment, but again, it's like let's say all of our servers were to shut down tomorrow.
Yeah.
All of our sales, all of our customers, all of that, that's actually back on your WooCommerce site. So every time you add a customer in Oliver, it's added instantly to your WooCommerce site. So everything is backed up by yourself too. We definitely run the security and backup and whatnot as well. And it would never happen, but just in case you own everything yourself. So
Yeah,
you can stop us
never
tomorrow.
happen. Never happen, I think, is a bit of a misnomer in
Uh,
this business. So
maybe a dangerous word, yeah, but
yeah, there's a web host in Montreal right now. I don't know if you've been reading it, but
yeah, the fire.
they have been hacked or had server issues. They claim it's server issues. I'm not convinced. And they've actually lost some of their backup servers in the process. So
Oh,
they're
jeez.
trying to do a rebuild of at least, don't quote me, but I think it's 6 or 8 servers, and they potentially have lost half the customer data on those. So it does
Yeah, you never
happen.
know. Yeah, we have it backed up at 3 different locations, physical locations too.
Yeah.
But it definitely can happen. But again, it would still live on your own host too, right?
Yeah.
On your own web. So,
Yeah. Are your servers located in North America, or are they overseas, or a
uh,
combination?
their combination, we're just about to move one into Europe, but right now they're in North America. So.
Yeah. And the one, I assume you're moving the one into Europe for GDPR reasons.
Yeah,
Is
so
that
there's some stuff there that we're working around. I'm not the one that are too much into those things there, but yeah.
Yeah, that's unfortunately all GDPR did is, in my opinion, and I'm a big privacy person, is it complicated the issue and created all kinds of work that could have been avoided if they streamlined the process. So
No, absolutely, yeah.
it's been a bit of an issue. Um, so in terms of security, because it's all hosted on your back end, the potential customer doesn't have any security issues, correct? It's
No,
pretty.
yeah.
The only
It,
issues they would have is their own WordPress front end or back end, which they need to
so
take
that's
care of.
often the weakest point, right?
Yeah.
But but if they that can be done right, as you, I'm sure you know a whole lot more about me than me about, but yeah, that's the weakest point.
I do. I have
Yeah.
at the time of this record, I have over 100 customers on security contracts just to do updates and backups. And earlier today, I was reading the iThemes security list, and iThemes put out a list of over, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 67 plugins in the last week that they found vulnerabilities was, and there were several Woo plugins on that list. So, oh yes, that world is getting awfuler by the day. Is the estimate on that
Yeah,
one?
and we are often one of those that takes a bit of energy, just like WooCommerce on your server. So we've seen us being flagged from time to time on it, even though, and then we go through it and we can just see it's because we're requesting orders back and forth or syncing too much and stuff. So we now go in and automatically white label our IP with those kind of plugins, right? So
Yeah.
we tell them, hey, we're okay.
Now the other question I was going to ask you, I wanted to go back to payment processing for a sec. I take it the payment processing is all done on the Oliver side of things, so that or is it done on the Woo side of things? How do you handle that?
So it's done on the Oliver side of things. There's a lot more requirements to the physical sales, shall I say? So we integrate directly with payment processors to guarantee the setup and the that we communicate with the terminals and hardware and whatnot, right? So
So then the customer doesn't have to worry about any fancy security setup on their end to handle the payment
oh,
process.
absolutely not. No, no, we deal directly with the banks or processors on that for them.
Yeah.
We have a support team here that is extremely helpful in helping them set it up. So kind of one of the things that we wanted to do right is give some proper support on setting these things up that people might be a little bit nervous about, right? I find you mentioned PayPal and whatnot, but one of the reasons why PayPal and Stripe and those are so popular is they're fairly easy to set up on WooCommerce. And you're a little bit worried about setting up the traditional processors, but we do that all the time too, right? So when a merchant come in, we often can save them quite a lot of rates on
Yep.
their processing, right?
Yep. That's a big deal. So, what's your typical rate for a merchant coming in?
So that really depends on the size, but I've seen people that used to pay 2.9 drop
Yep.
down to 0.9%.
Okay.
But that's one of the really good cases. But it all depends. What we often do is we have a massive network of all of the biggest banks now around in the world, and
Yep.
we kind of say, well, let's combine this. See, most merchants, what they do is they go with their physical store, and then they say, I need a processor, and I do 300,000 a year here.
Yep.
And then I need my online processors, just PayPal, and I do 300,000 there.
And
Okay,
you
so
give PayPal basically 3%, three
yeah, you
percent
give
instead of 1%.
yeah, and often the in-person one, you're paying a little bit less than online, but because you only said 300,000 a year, they look at you as a smaller shop. So
Yep.
what we like to do is we say, okay, let's help you get the best bang for your buck. So
Yep.
what we do is we say, let's combine these and go to one processor and say, dear one processor, can you help us with this combined statement of $600,000 in volume, which makes it more interesting for them, and therefore our merchants get a much better deal. So we do that a whole lot. It's kind of we started out from we want to help the merchants save and sell better, right? So um, yeah, we do that quite often.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem with going to PayPal, Square, Stripe. They're all basically 2.9%. And depending on the processor, how long it takes to get it out of the processor into your bank account. And one of the biggest drawbacks, frankly, with PayPal is it can take 3 or 4 days. Square's usually 36, less than 36 hours. Stripe is usually next day. But it varies, and that's one of the biggest problems. And you're paying them 2.9%, and they're hanging on to your money to make interest on the money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're exactly my words. Like there is no reason why you should be paying that much and wait
Yeah,
for your money. It's your money,
yeah.
and you shouldn't be waiting for them. So all of the processes we have, I think the longest is 48 hours, but most would be next day, money in your account at a lesser fee, and yeah, and then what I find with Stripe and PayPal is if you have shipped something to a merchant and or to a customer and they complain to their credit card, you have no chance of winning that case.
You have no, having been
No
through
chance.
it with a
Yeah,
client that I did $7,000 of work for. And
yeah.
this is going back to like 9 years ago when I first started my agency. After I completed the job, invoiced the job, got paid, they claimed to PayPal, they did the old let's dispute the transaction.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, PayPal came back to me and said, we're going to take the money off your credit card. You're wrong. And I'm like, excuse me, I finished the job. I've got the client's signature on a form saying the job was completed to satisfaction, and they still dispute it.
Merchants do not stand a chance with those giants there.
Yep.
And they don't even want to fight for you. And that's one of the biggest things that I often tell our customers when we help refer them to whomever there is the right processor for them is deal with somebody that cares, right? Like you get
Yeah.
an account manager that you can call and say, hey, I've shipped some products. They want to dispute this, but they haven't even refunded the hardware or the product that I did or sent, right?
Mhm.
And you actually stand a chance. It's probably reversed totally, where there's a much higher chance of winning that case because the
Yeah.
processors on your side, they're losing out on it, and it's just, yeah, you're
The
dealing with
the
a person.
Yeah, the payment processor should be your partner in your business, not a vendor client relationship. And I mean that
Absolutely.
wholeheartedly. And when people start to set their businesses up with payment processors, with hosts that way, with all kinds of stuff as partners, then life running your business becomes much easier.
Yeah, totally. And that we do that all day long because we want to make sure that our merchants have a smooth setup for both. And then it's also one statement, uh, one relationship you gotta build instead of one online, one in person. It just makes more sense throughout, as far as I'm concerned. And there's quite a bit of money to save on top of all of it.
Oh, there's no question. This has been an amazing conversation. I'm sure the listeners learned a little bit about Oliver POS. If they want to get a hold of you or they want to download Oliver POS, how's the best way?
Yeah, sure. So for downloading, just go on the WordPress repository, type Oliver POS, and then we should come up. You just click install, and really 3 or 4 questions later, your store should be synced and you can start selling. If you want to just reach out to me, if you're a developer that want to start building some cool plugins for Oliver or change how we sell, or how your merchants sell, then you can write to me personally at mn@oliverpos.com.
Thank you very much for your time, Matthias. I wish you and Oliver POS all the best.
Absolutely. Thank you too.
A very special thank you to Mattias Nielsen for joining me on this edition of the SDM show. I hope you enjoyed learning about Oliver POS as much as I did. Thank you for listening to this edition of the SDM show. This podcast is brought to you by Stunning Digital Marketing. For links to Stunning Digital Marketing and Rob Cairns, please go to stunningdigitalmarketing.info. This podcast is dedicated to Rob's late father, Bruce Cairns. Keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. Make your business succeed. Bye for now.